co-founded New York State Allies for Public Education, a coalition of over 50 education organizations. Over the past 4 years, Jeanette has advocated for the removal of Common Core and high-stakes testing in our children's classrooms, against the defunding and privatization of our public schools, and for the concept of whole child teaching and learning and bringing joy back again to education. She has testified before the State Senate, State Assembly, and Governor Cuomo's Common Core Task Force. She continues to work with numerous state legislators, SED officials, Board of Regents members, rank-and-file educators, unions, parents, to clear a path back to common sense education that meets the needs of all New York State children. Watching her efforts reminds me of a quote by the anthropologist Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Welcome, Ms. Deutermann.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. One thing that a lot of people in the media keep asking me, especially when Commissioner Elia came out with her big changes, and they said, "So you guys are going to opt back in now, right?" And every time I get asked, I have to do a double take, because they don't seem to understand that nothing has changed for our kids in the classroom. Nothing has changed for the experience that they are having this year and proposed for next year. So as of right now, this is still going on. All of these things that we're talking about, this, Jamaal and I were sitting here like laughing, even though it's not funny, but we were laughing through a lot of the discussions because it is so insane. It just doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. I remember a few years ago when we first started, it was probably 2 months in to when I started the Facebook page and started getting involved, and I was at a press conference in New York City. And I had been invited there by some city activists that wanted me to be there to represent Long Island. And we spoke to a whole room of reporters, tons of reporters there, and we were just going through what was happening. This is 3 years ago. This is before it got really insane. So this is just the tip of insane. And as we're describing everything that's going on, like the whole room got quiet, and one of the reporters said, "This sounds crazy." And because it was like new. Nobody knew really what was happening when we laid it out, and we were like, yeah, it is. And unfortunately, as much as the state ed would like to make us think that everything's different now and it's all safe to go back in the water and come on in, it's just not. And we know better. And unfortunately, this myth has been perpetuated by a lot of administrators as well, that parents, we're all good now. Send your kids back in. And I really wonder what those administrators, how they're going to answer to parents when after the first day of testing, their kid comes home, potentially after sitting for this test all morning and even through lunch, how that kid, when that kid comes home in the state that most likely they will come home in, how is that administrator going to explain to the parent when they've been convincing the parents that everything's different now and that it's fine? So why are we still asking you to opt out? Why aren't we just saying, well, as do what you want to do at this point, parents, if you want to opt out, opt out, if you don't, you don't. Why are we still doing all this work? Traveling all over the island, all over the state, presenting? Because opt-out numbers are our means to a change. It is the way that we are able to get the backup and the power behind us to push for change. It is not the leaders of all the different state organizations out there that are getting this change happening. It is parents opting out of these tests, teachers as parents opting out of these tests. That is what is giving us the backing. That's what's giving us that power to be able to walk into the legislators' offices and say, we want change. That is why they are listening to us. If we had 10,000 opting out, do you think any of them would be interested in anything we'd have to say? Okay, so this is the opting out. It protects kids. It's a means to an end. The byproduct is really the fact that it protects our kids. But it really, without these numbers, without a sustained movement against what's happening, we lose our power, we lose our leverage. This is our leverage. There was a lecture that I used to do in some of these forums over the last couple of years, and I used to list what we want in our classrooms. What do we want to see? Because it's not just about what we don't want. We also have to have very clear-cut statements of what it is we do want to see in these classrooms. And I look back when I'm preparing for these forums, I look back at some of my old speeches, and I saw this list that I used to use, and I looked at all the things to say, okay, what do I have to take off now? You know, okay, some things are different, so let's see, what can I eliminate from this list if I'm going to use this list again? And unfortunately, there wasn't one single item that I could take off this list of what we want to see, because we have not gotten any of it yet. So I'm going to read these to you, and I want you to think to yourself, do we have this yet? We want to see creativity return to the classroom rather than scripted and timed modules. We want our schools to be filled with music, art, and drama. These are often the keys that unlock a child's mind to the creative world around them. The loss of these subjects will have ramifications that extend to every corner of our society. We want our children to be appropriately challenged, not needlessly frustrated. We want more fiction literature and creative writing, not structured writing assignments which may prepare them for test answers, but fails to produce tomorrow's literary writers. And I want to just give a quick example of that. My son had come home the other day, and he was doing this question, this ditto that had all these questions on it. And it was about the fantastic Mr. Fox. And I said, oh my God, I said, did you read that book? And he said, yes, I did. And I said, when did you read that? Oh my God, that's so great, because how often is that happening anymore in our schools, where these kids are able to read, fiction literature that is really fun for them. So I said I was very excited that he had read it. He goes to his backpack and he pulls out two more dittos. And it was, the close reading excerpt of The Fantastic Mr. Fox. And this was his way of reading. And this, I'm not blaming the teacher. This is all I have time for. I mean, honestly, when he first said it, I was like, how did they fit that in? So that's what the kids now think is a book. Is a few paragraphs of an excerpt of a book. We want greater emphasis on science and social studies and not just taught as an extension of ELA. I was just saying to somebody today, they should be teaching ELA through science, not science through ELA. We don't want to just read about science. We want kids to do science, especially the elementary school. That's a huge missing component in elementary school, is to do science experiments. And if you have boys, you know that that's a real key to unlocking, real interest for them, especially boys. Girls too, but especially boys. Science experiments, hands-on. And I have my son so trained now that he came out of school today with this balloon and he said, Mom, we actually did a hands-on science project. Sure, his teacher loves dealing with him. We want more recess in physical education, not multiple choice tests during gym class, and recess being used for catching up on ELA and math work that kids did not have time to complete in class. We want assessments used to design and assess a well-rounded education, not ones that narrow the curriculum and unfairly evaluate educators administering them. Tests that are appropriate in length and content, that are used to help our children, not hurt them. We want tests designed by our educators, not created by for-profit corporations. That's another piece. How many of you have heard, oh, this year it's Questar, Pearson's gone? Okay. Pearson's still alive and well this year in our tests. How many of you here wrote the questions for this year's test? Now that's amazing, because I am told, and I've asked this question at the last 4 forums with 300 people at one and 200 people at another and however many here, and I've asked that question over and over, and I have not seen one hand. But apparently this year's test was completely written by educators. We want to see the tests our children are taking, not just a number score 6 months after it's given. We want our classrooms paced by the needs of children and teachers in the class, not by the looming test dates. This is another big piece of the problem. That instead of teachers being able to slow the curriculum down when they feel that the class just isn't getting it. They keep saying these tests are so important diagnostically for teachers to know where the kid is at. Meanwhile, the teachers know where the kid is at. You ask any teacher about your child within the first 5 days of school, and they have a pretty good understanding of what kids are struggling with and which kids need extra help, which kids are going to have some trouble with this area. They know that already, but yet, because of this curriculum and the looming test date, they can't move at the pace of their kids. They have to move at the pace of the test. We want before, after, and during school test prepping cram sessions offered to elementary and middle school children eliminated. This practice fosters a culture of test scores defining our children. If the message is you are more than a test score, these test prep courses undermine that message. That is actually what got me really, initially got me started, was before I was awake and I opened Pandora's box, my school had offered early morning Sunrise Learning Academy. And it was like a letter like, you win! You win! Your kid gets to come to school an hour early on Tuesday and an hour early on Thursday to do math and ELA 2 months every week before the test. He was in 4th grade. So he was 9 years old, and he was told to come to school early, 2 hours each week. And it was telling him this great news, when you win! And he crumpled to the floor in a heap, crying, sobbing. And it was pretty much right then and there that I decided that he was no longer going to take part in any of this. Because it was really a light bulb that really went off right then and there, that this is not good for him. This is no way are we going to take part in this. This is insane. We want our children to feel empowered, smart, and successful, not unsure, stupid, and like failures. We want our struggling schools to be boosted up and supported, not punished and closed. We need our children of poverty to be raised up to meet the bar, rather than the bar simply being placed higher and even more out of reach. That is another thing. She spoke about working with Todd Kaminsky about a bill for the pathways, and I've been working with him also. He is one of the only legislators so far that has really jumped at the chance to get some real changes to that Education Transformation Act. And another one that he and I are working on is to repeal the receivership law and completely eliminate that from the law, as well as the APPR, the 50%, and the pathways, and also the length of the tests. We want standards designed by our educators, child development experts, and those on the front lines, not by corporations, testing companies, and those that have had no real experience in the classrooms or with the children they're designing these standards for. We want smaller class sizes, more teachers, and fewer unfunded mandates. As parents, we want to be included in our child's education, not discounted, and the opt-out movement is the one sure way to make sure parents stay the voice in what's going to happen over the next couple years. Dr. Rella had said that this is, and it's very true, this is what's going to happen this year is going to probably determine the next 10 years of education. It's extremely important this year to get this right. We want our teachers to love what they do, to feel appreciated and valued, not beaten down and defeated. Teachers who love to teach create students who love to learn. So, as you heard this list, unfortunately, all of these things are still in place, all of these things are still a problem, and that's why we're still fighting. So I talked a little about what has changed and what has been nothing but a pack of lies. The length of testing, the reduced time on testing. There's a great graph, if you're on social media, that shows from 2000, I think it's 2010, and then it shows last year and this year, and it's like down here, and then the two are right here. You can barely, they said you need like a magnifying glass to see the change in the bar graph on this, from last year to this year. I think it's like, you know, they took one question off this one grade, 2 questions off another grade, some of the grades no change at all, you know, 2 multiple choice on the ELA, on math. You know, the changes are so minimal. And on top of it, they added the unlimited time, which all of you teachers, yeah, it's crazy. All you teachers, you know that you have students, especially the real high achieving, like